Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Off the Shelf. I'm Lance Barron, president of the Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter for this year. And I want to send out a special welcome to any new members or guests that are in attendance. The mission of Sisters in Crime is to promote crime writers and to engage readers of crime writing. During our regular chapter meetings, we do mostly with writers, and we talk about craft and forensics and the business of being published. And on Off the Shelf, we talk about and try to engage readers with new authors. And this morning, we are very excited. Dawn Gepfer, the host of the program, its originator, and driving force behind it, is going to interview Katherine Nichols, our own Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter member. And we're looking forward to this a great deal. Katherine Nichols lives in Marietta, Georgia, with her husband and 2 rescue dogs. She's a proud mother of 2 lovely daughters, and a grandson is in the family. In addition to a passion for writing, she enjoys reading, hiking, and traveling. She's a member of the Atlanta Writers Club, the Atlanta chapter of Sisters in Crime, and of Wild Women Who Write. And those of you who may remember that were in attendance last year, the panel discussion the Wild Women Who Write put on about critique groups. She's been published in Allen Review's Equill, Atlanta Writers Club magazine, and Shout Them from the Mountaintops, Georgia Poems and Stories. Her 3rd novel, Trust Issues, has just been released, and it's been described as a breakneck whodunit with more layers than a Pouce Cafe. And I'll let her define whatever that means. So, go ahead, Kathy.
No, I was just going to say, I meant to look that up. One of my reviewers said that, and I love it. Smart, obviously. So I'm assuming it's a layered cake.
Oh, very good. All right. Dawn, take it away.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Lance, very much. And as Lance said, we are very excited that Katherine Nichols, is joining us today. She is a friend of ours, most of us here on the call, because she is a member of Sisters in Crime Atlanta, and she's very active on our board. And so it's great to be able to talk with her, especially because she does have what I feel like is a very interesting and exciting story to tell. So I want to always kick us off with what I call our author's backstory, which is learning more about who our guest author is, aside from what we can learn about them by reading the back cover of their book. So Kathy, please share with us more about who you are.
Well, a large part of my life, I spent telling stories. When I was younger, people would ask me to please stop telling stories. But obviously, I couldn't do that. And I had wanted to be a writer from as early as I realized people could do that and other people would listen to them. I remember reading those little blue biography books when I was maybe 2nd, 3rd grade or whatever, and thinking, wow, somebody wrote these. You know, it takes a while before you make that connection. But life kind of plays interesting tricks on you. I also loved the idea of teaching. Teaching was not really a second choice for me. It was just another option. And I loved it. I taught high school English for 30 years face-to-face. I did some virtual, I did some teacher training. And along the way, I kept trying to write, but you know, you have family, you have the job, you have friends, you know, you have a life. So when I retired, I thought, if I don't do something pretty soon, I'm not going to do anything. And I got involved with a small writing group at Kennesaw State University. there, one of the gentlemen in there said I needed to join a bigger group. And I was terrified to do that. It's funny because I didn't really have a problem talking in front of class and talking to all these students. But when you read your own writing in front of people, I think it's just terrifying. And it took me a good amount of time to go to the group and then finally to bring something. And that's what the wonder of critique groups is. Once you start making these connections with people, you relax and you open up to them. And it doesn't feel like you're standing naked in front of an audience. You know, you have as many clothes as you feel comfortable bringing that day. So I joined the critique group. I met some people from the Atlanta Writers Club. I started learning how to submit, learning how to polish. And then my dream of being published came true. I couldn't believe it. And when I got the first contract, I really didn't believe it. I was sort of celebrating, but I said, you know what? I'm going to sign this contract really quickly before they realize they have the wrong Katherine Nichols. And so I signed it. The second book, I felt a little more comfortable about it. I thought, well, they probably didn't make 2 mistakes in a row. So I sent it very quickly too. And that was just amazing. And now I have another one out. I have another one coming out in June, one in the fall as well. So it's exciting. I encourage everybody not to think that it's too late, that you're too old to follow your dream.
So is it safe to say that
Yeah,
hi dog, look, this one of the things I love about us doing it this way and also meeting with authors where they are in their homes is exactly what's happening to you. And I also ask forgiveness because I have 2 dogs and a cat and they love to make noise and bark. So forgive me when they decide to chime in, but I do love seeing your dog. They're trying to join.
He's a sweetheart.
Let them. That's part of who you are.
Character in Trust Issues. Her name is Jolene, and I named her that because Dolly Parton doesn't play an actual role in the book, but her song does. And so I think I'm going to send Dolly a fan letter and tell her this story. It will probably go in her circular file cabinet, but I'm thinking she's so sweet. Maybe somebody would read it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You're going to have to keep us posted on that.
I will.
Very, very curious. So, here's what I heard. You had a long career as a teacher, and that kept you very busy. And then you retired. When did you retire? Like after 30 years, or?
I taught 30 years, and then when I got ready to retire, I decided that I would not go from 60 to 0. I would apply for some part-time jobs. I applied for 5 part-time jobs and I got every one of them. And I was still kind of working almost full-time, but I could control my time. And the things that I was able to do then kind of energized me and got me thinking, okay, now's the time. And then I gradually just dropped one off every 3 months or so.
So when I love your story about and how you went about getting comfortable starting to write and to share your work. How long was that? What was the time frame from joining the writing group with Kennesaw and eventually finishing your novel?
Well, like most writers, I think I finished like 3 or 4 novels in a 10-year period from when I retired and got in the writing groups. I would say the first 3 are probably never going to see the light of day. I am, however, cannibalizing some of the material from them. So I loved some of the characters. I'm very much character based. I loved the characters in them. So I kind of, I'm blending some of those characters, stealing them. But before I actually got published, it was probably 6 years. And, I wrote like crazy, revised, then finally came up with The Sometimes Sister, which to me was, I thought, yeah, I want people to hear this story. I'm going to work at that.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, because it did sound like you had multiple story ideas. And yet what was it about The Sometimes Sister that you said, this is the one that I'm going to send off and concentrate on? And
for me, The Sometimes Sister, the characters I loved, but the message I think was really important there. I like to have, well, I've had a thematic thread in the first three, and it's dealing with loss and grief and how you manage that. And the Sometimes Sister, my story, I don't have a sister. I kind of always wanted one. I have a brother, and that's great, but it's a different kind of relationship as I imagined, and as my readers and feedback have told me. After hearing some of the people at book clubs, I'm like, maybe I'm okay that I don't have a sister. People really open up to you sometimes. But the thing about the Sometimes Sister is it was loosely based on someone I knew who had a friend. Their younger sister did run off with not anybody's fiance, but she ran away to a place where extradition was shaky because her husband was involved in some bad stuff, and he ended up being abusive, and he actually killed her. And I didn't know them personally, or I could never really have done this because I just heard it. Nothing else is the same. But I knew the sister a little bit. And so my thinking was, oh my gosh, how would you feel being so helpless and then losing? And then I added something that was a little bit part of my own personal experience. In my book, the narrator, Grace, doesn't get a chance to forgive her sister before the sister dies. And I thought, and for me, that is like one of the most difficult things that you could deal with. You lose someone when you're on bad terms, and you don't get a chance to say, I still love you, no matter what. So that was kind of why I thought this book has more than just really great characters. I fell in love with my characters so much so that I wasn't going to do a sequel, but there's a sequel coming out in June, and I still love my characters. They may not leave me alone after this one, but I did feel that this one had more than just great characters and an engaging plot. It's very suspenseful, and I always have dead bodies. So lots of dead bodies.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because one of the things that I have heard you described as, and I thought this is super fitting, is suspense with heart and humor. And yet, to me, in reading the description of the Sometimes Sister, it doesn't, it sounds very suspenseful, very thriller-esque, and it is very emotional. As you said, you've got this very emotional element where these two sisters were estranged, and then something happens to one, and the surviving sister is there left to pick up the pieces and come to terms on her own. So to me, I'm like, okay, there's heart in that, of course, but I don't think there's a lot of humor in that. Am I wrong?
Well, here's where the humor comes in. Grace is part of a very interesting family. I think everyone has interesting families. They're like, who was it? Is it Chekhov? Someone said all happy families are alike and all unhappy families are different, or something like that, but all families are unhappy in their own way. And I think all families have a certain character. Sometimes they forget how to enjoy each other. And the Sometimes Sister, even though the mother she's distraught, but she is a character. And we also learn some very dark secrets in her past, but even in their darkness, they're kind of funny. One of the main characters is named Les Roy, and his name is humorous, but the reason for it is so sad because his dad was a horrible bully named Roy. And he said, when he saw the baby, he said, oh, I knew he was never going to amount to much. He can't be Roy Jr., but he can be a Les Roy. And but they met, but we turned that into, he's a hoot. And he's always twirling and dancing, and he's funny. And the interactions are funny. Grace is not funny in herself, but I think the way she comes to understand her strength, it's humorous, and that we can identify with it. I mean, she doesn't know how to shoot a gun, but she might have to learn. And she's kind of like, if somebody handed me a gun, I'm not a gun person, so would it be funny? Well, if I didn't shoot my foot off, yes. And so that's the kind of humor it is. It's like you're going to love Grace because she can laugh at herself, but you're always going to be rooting for her to realize that there's more to her than what makes her laugh at herself.
One of the things too that I found interesting about that book is that the setting is it's an international setting. She has to go to Ecuador.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us why Ecuador and what your familiarity with Ecuador is that you were able to write about it.
Well, I got my best compliment in my critique group. One of the men in the critique group is very well traveled. And he asked me, when did you go to Ecuador? And I said, last night on Google. I would love to go to Ecuador. I've gotten a little bit timid about it because there's so much turmoil in that area. But I needed a place that had very lax extradition laws, because the husband he's an attorney, but he's gotten involved with some bad people and he needs to get away. So I looked at countries like that, and there were, I believe, wasn't the Philippines, but maybe it was the Philippines. And then there were a couple other countries that I didn't know anything about the climate or didn't ever want to go there. So that's why I picked Ecuador. Also, that was when Edward Snowden, he had gone to Ecuador, and I think it was the Ecuadorian embassy that he was staying at in London. But so I thought that would be fitting. And I love the kind of atmosphere that you have in that beach town. It's set in near Montanito, which is, I want to go there so badly. Like, it's supposed to be, I don't surf, but there's cool surfers. It's kind of got a hippie-esque vibe. And at one time, I don't know if it's still the same, but it was very international as well. I sent the sister Stella and her husband there. They should have fit in with that kind of quasi-criminal fun group, and she's miserable. And her love of the beach and is something that has always connected her to Grace. So I needed all that kind of setting. So I researched Ecuador. I want to go even more. It has some really incredibly beautiful architecture, but it also has some terrible poverty. So it captures the essence of sort of ambiguity. Our feelings for each other are ambiguous. In Ecuador, there's the Guayas River. It's and Grace doesn't go on the Guayas River, but as she's looking down from the plane, she sees this river, and she remembers reading that the river changes course 2 times a day. And I thought, I accidentally picked the best place in the world, because Grace and her feelings change course throughout the novel until she's able to get to her destination. So that was just serendipitous. And I thought, I got to go to Ecuador. Maybe we can do a Sisters in Crime field trip. We'll stay close together.
I'm in, and I really do love hearing about that process for you, and also the intention behind it, and then, as you said, the surprise of it. I think that is great, and I also think that that's encouraging for other people who are joining us today, that maybe they want to write about something and they have that sense of, I don't want to just keep this here in what I know. I want to expand, but I haven't ventured to this point. Well, thanks to the internet, there are options for us now. So before I go on, I do want to mention to everybody that this is supposed to be interactive. I would love it if anybody has a question, if you chime in, or feel free to use the chat. We do have somebody monitoring the chat, and they'll let us know if you asked a question, and need us to speak for you if you're not comfortable speaking up yourself. So please do that for us. So going on. So before I do, does anybody have anything they want to say?
I just want to say something, and I can't see the chat right now, so stop me. You said something about you know, the internet is there for you. You don't always have to write. They say write about what you know. And I feel like that really kind of people. And the reason that I was bold enough, or felt emboldened enough to do it, I thought of Emily Dickinson, and she says, I never saw a Moor. And she didn't. She never saw a Moor, but she writes about a Moor. And I thought, Emily Dickinson didn't have the internet. She never went anyplace. She was pretty much agoraphobic. but she could write about things she didn't really know. And I think when you write about things that you don't really know, now you have no excuse not to get the details right, but it's more about a longing. And you get that longing in there sometimes when you're writing about something you wish you knew more about. And so I encourage people, don't let old writing sayings hold you back. Do what you need to do what you want to do.
I agree. And I can tell you, oh, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, no, I apologize for coming in late,
Oh.
but I have a question, and one simple one is, what is the name of the book? But also with the river, when you say it changed course, do you mean like from north-south to east-west, or was it a tidal river? Or
It was east to west. I'm not positive, but it literally would be going this way in the mornings and then going another way in the evening or later in the day. And it's the Guayas River. So I mean, I'm sure other rivers do that, and it probably has something to do with the tides because it is flowing into, don't know what ocean. My geography is terrible.
yeah, okay, the Potomac is a tidal river too, as far as Washington. So I was just curious if it was the same sort of thing. And what is your book?
Well, can you see this?
Yes.
That's the Sometime Sister. That's the first one. And I have 2 others that are out. But like with the Sometime Sister was like my firstborn, even though I had written others. But it was the first one that I thought, oh, other people are going to be reading this. And I'm not one to look at my reviews too much. I have my fellow writers and good friends will say, oh, I got this review. And I'm like, that's why I don't look. And that's just a little commercial here. Please write reviews for people if you read their books, especially authors that don't, they're just coming into the field. But I think I've gotten pretty good reviews on the Sometime Sister. And I think it's because I was right that it does hit some notes for people, lots of different notes.
Margaret, you have a question. You're muted though.
Yeah, I do. So Kathy, you talked about how you wrote 3 books that ended up not seeing the light of day. I will say I've written 1 so far that hasn't seen the light of day, which is probably for the best. So I'd be curious to hear more about, I mean, you talked about it some, but how was that process for you? Did the 3 books that didn't see the light of day help you to improve your craft?
Oh, definitely. And 2 of those, I'm really using some of the characters and events in what I'm working on right now. And it's going to be fun. It's not like a weird thing. One of them was more, I'm not good at knowing the audience about young adult, but I think one of them would qualify more as an older young adult, if that makes sense. I think you have younger girls reading it, but I think like the Hunger Games sort of, I think you different kind of audience. I may work on that one again and deal with that, but absolutely it helped because the whole time I'm going through the critique group as if I think these might be published because I didn't realize that they weren't going to be. And I sent query letters. I learned about query letters. I sent off and I kept track of all my rejections, but I never stopped writing. And that's one thing I tell people, if you want to call yourself a writer, you have to be writing. You can't be waiting for something wonderful to happen. With the Sometime Sister, I got an agent and she didn't sit on it. She really tried, but she couldn't sell it. And I wrote the second one called The Unreliables, nothing. So we broke up amicably. And but I was thrilled that I was able to get an agent now. And I'll tell you, you go through these things where I got the agent and I thought, well, look out, Oprah, I'm going to be in your book club. Well, 2 years later, and I waited too long. I should have tried, but I kept writing that whole time. And then after I got rid of the agent, I started resubmitting again. And then I found my publisher, Black Rose Writing. They don't require an agent. And they do a lot. It's an independent traditional, a small traditional press, but they don't require an agent. So they loved the Sometime Sister, and they've been very supportive of my other writing. So I gave up on the first three in a way and used them and thought I learned from them. I'm not embarrassed by them. I will say that. For first efforts, they're not bad. And, but they have to be better if I'm going to do anything with them. So yeah, it's a long process. And I was working with a group of seniors. Many of them are younger than I am, at Roswell, the senior extended learning program. And the idea was get it on the paper. Don't edit yourself. Don't do anything. Just get it all down and then go back and work with it. So I would say for my first two books, that's really kind of what happened. Thanks.
Liz,
Good to
I'm
see you.
sorry.
No, I was just saying, I hadn't seen Margaret in a while. I was just saying, it's good to see her.
So Liz also has a question. Liz?
Well, mine is more of a comment, because I think it's really interesting that a lot of us have connections to Ecuador. That I studied abroad in Ecuador when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
Sharon traveled to Ecuador and wrote a book of like a cozy mystery based in Galapagos, because she was in Galapagos. And Linda Sands used to run some kind of writing workshop in Ecuador. So
Wow.
I think we need to, get the Ecuador connection solidified and get maybe take advantage of any contacts Linda might still have and go visit again. I haven't been there in a really long time.
And maybe we could get Sisters in Crime to have a Ecuadorian group. They might not host us literally, but take us around.
And I do have a like a cozy paranormal that has an Ecuador connection too. It's just that one's in my drawer. That one won't see the light of day for a while, but
Well,
because it is a beautiful country, and it's somewhat rugged in places and somewhat, I mean, I haven't been there in decades, but there isn't even electricity in a lot of places. So, I'm sure that you couldn't go there and be using the internet all the time. And, so it would be a good place to plot some murder mysteries too.
Yeah. And there's so much of it that looks so beautiful. And, I want to go.
Yeah. Flying into Quito used to be kind of scary though. So maybe we'll go somewhere else.
It's very high. The altitude is really
Yeah,
high.
it's in the mountains and
Surrounded by all these huge mountains that
yeah. So you have to
We
are the
came in
tallest ones in the world.
the Guayaquil.
And Guayaquil is more flat on the coast. Coast. So
Guayaquil is where it's flatter. You don't have to fly
Closer.
circle the mountains and then dive in. It feels like they're doing, but
if you're an airline employee trying to get on the flight space available,
and
not
Linda
only
has
do you have to worry
friends.
about lack of seats, but sometimes because of the altitude, they're not able to fill up the plane because they're looking to lighten the weight. And so that's always, that can sometimes be a factor.
Very interesting and definitely intriguing, and you have my curiosity for sure piqued. So let's one of the things I've also noticed, Kathy, you talk about that, like the process, and it took, this really, a number of years to go from writing to actually publishing. What I find amazing is how once you published The Sometime Sister, you published that in 2021. And then in 2022, you have 2 books that were released. So you went from this, and I think you kind of explained it a little bit. You found your publisher, and and that helped. And you already kind of had some of the stories in the hopper. So it was just probably a matter of tweaking and getting them ready. But I think that's very impressive that you turned out 2 books in a year, because what we hear is how long it takes, people to get books out. So
I was never trying to write the great American novel. I taught English. I taught great American novels, many of which I think probably beat the love of reading out of my students. not that I think we tried to teach really college material, and because we loved it so much, we thought that we'd help them get it, which there's a lot to that. But I think what it is we all have so many stories in us. And I think some people take longer to recognize that their stories should be out there. And a lot of people will write one book. It'll take them a long time to write that book. And they become, to me, so obsessed with that one book that they forget they have other stories. And for me, at my age, I feel like I have to be productive, because who knows when the mind goes. And so I have gotten pretty disciplined. Lots of life things still get in the way. But yeah, I think if you want to be a happier writer, you're always writing something. And for me, it needs to be not necessarily new, but another story I want to get out there. So yes, a lot of people, I'm trying to think, is it Susan Sands? I think she's so prolific, and a lot of the cozy authors, because they have their setting kind of already arranged for them, and they can just move on into more stories in that setting. So I guess it's the type of writing that you're doing that's going to dictate to you how long it takes. And I'm all for those people who want to really nurse that novel, that if that's what makes you happy, do it. But I think you'd be happier if you try to get it out in the world and then keep working on something else. I know I'm not comparing myself to Pat Conroy, but I know Pat Conroy had a situation where he had a backlog. He got something published, finally got something published, and then his publisher, he did pretty well. And so, yeah, they want more. And it really helps to have more than one. I know Liz has quite a few, I believe, cozies out there. And it really helps to have more than one book.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. When you write in a series, not only do you have the setting and most of the characters, but you also have the voice down. You know who's going to get the funny lines, who's going to be more serious, who's going to be the antagonist and their accents and stuff. So yeah, it makes writing much easier. But I put my cyber hand up because I wanted to ask you, like, how do you think teaching and reading these novels, I don't know which ones were on your list of great American novels, how do you think that has informed your writing or your ideas of what you want to do in your books? Can you answer that? Can you answer that? But can you give us an idea?
Yeah, and I think sometimes we forget that, when Fitzgerald and Hemingway were writing, they were doing kind of the same thing we're doing, only it took longer with the whole publishing thing. And people were reading those books and relating to them. I think part of the problem teaching them is it's a little bit harder to help kids understand what was going on. You almost have to do a lot of historical background. You have to really help them get into it, which takes longer, that's why you need to do it, I think, in a classroom setting. I wanted my novels to be accessible to people who enjoyed reading, and I wanted to sneak in the in-depth stuff and I hope some good solid writing. Some of my descriptions I think are good. I think they could go up against some good, really good authors, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm not like trying to describe the hills of Kilimanjaro like Hemingway, and I'm not doing bullfights, although I have some better action scenes in the bullfights. Sorry. But anyway, I learned, I think, to understand your audience in time and place. I think that's the most important thing. And to know, that's the nice thing about having more than one book, especially if it's a series, because you already have people who love it. You have people who want to go back to your town. They feel like they're there when they're reading about it. And I love that about those kinds of series. I don't really do that, but I do when I return to Grace, there's a brand new character I introduced too, But when I return there, I hope people will feel like they're coming back to visit an old friend. And I love that in books.
So two things. Liz, that was a great question. And it's something I was curious about as well. So I'm glad you asked it. And Kathy, you actually answered my next question, because I was going to reference the fact that your three published novels do not have, that they're not a series. And yet you were talking about the benefits of, serial settings. And so I thought that was interesting that you were promoting something that you really you're working on, but you hadn't done yet. So before
the book
yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The book that's coming out in the fall is the first in what I hope will be a series. And it, like I said, I've kind of gone back. No, it was brand new. I did not take any characters from any past books. But the second, what I hope will be the second in the series that I'm working on now, I'm blending characters from an earlier book. I'm bringing them in as part of this series. And so there'll be familiar characters, there'll be new characters, but the new characters are still familiar to me, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm working on the series.
I'm excited to learn more about it. Linda has a very interesting question, and this has to do with your writing career. She says, do you find that you have to do all the book promotion? Do you have to do all the book promotion with Black Rose, or are they helpful in marketing your book for you?
Black Rose is helpful. Like, they do, like, I got this notification from them last week, and I have to brag. I'm just so excited about it. My second book, The Unreliables, somehow they must have submitted it, or I don't know if they submitted. I don't know what happened, but there's a magazine called the Strand Mystery Magazine, and they'll have unpublished works like from Shirley Jackson. They'll have published works that they repeat, and they came out with a list of the best mystery novels in 2022. And my book, The Unreliables, was on it. And I'm in like Anne Cleves is on, she has one on there. I can't even remember the other people because I'm still like kind of flabbergasted by the experience. And Black Rose had to have done that because I don't know anything about it.
Congratulations on that. I saw that you put that on Facebook.
Yeah.
Is that the Strand, the bookstore in New York City?
I don't know if there's any connection or not. I've been kind of looking, like I said, I know it's a magazine. It's that's been around a long time. They center on mystery. I don't know about that. When I looked it up, there was also a Strand that was based in London. So
yeah,
investigating the connections, but I just got so excited I didn't really have time to look into it too much. I was like, yay. And so the question, I do have to do a ton of my own promotion. It was Linda, I think, that asked that. You will have to do that no matter how you get published. I have a friend, you guys know, Roger Johns. And Roger's great. His writing is fantastic. He had this really super gritty mystery set in Louisiana. And St. Martin's Press picked it up. They did almost nothing to help him. I mean, the man is a master of promotions, I think, himself, but he's like knocking himself out, going all over the place and really trying to get it. All you can do is regional. It's very difficult to get attention for your book in other parts of the country. I had a review though from the Sometime Sister from India, and I know that wasn't a friend. So I was very excited. So yes, Black Rose does more than a lot of the smaller presses do. And I think it does close to the same amount that you would get at a bigger press as a smaller author, if that makes sense. I shouldn't say smaller author. None of us are smaller, but a less recognized author.
To answer y'all's question about the Strand magazine, it is a quarterly publication, and there you go, Linda. And it does concentrate on the mystery genre. So I don't think the bookstore in New York is specific to just mysteries, but this could be. It is a interesting coincidence that they're using the same name, you know. But some of the other authors with Kathy are Sean Cosby, who we have talked to, Tessa Wiegert, Nelson D. DeMille.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot on here. Sharana Williams. So, and Kathy, oh, you know, I'll tell you one I really want to bring up. Deborah Goodrich Royce is on the list. And, you know, I looked it up and I was like, how many mystery novels are published in a year? Right. And I couldn't get specific. Like I kept trying to find specifically mystery novels. But overall, the publishing industry, traditional publishing, varies between 500,000 to 1 million books published a year. And then when you factor in non-traditional publishing, it's more like 4 million books. So if you think about, let's just say mysteries is a quarter of those numbers. Kathy was one of 25. Like, I mean, that's just mind-boggling. And the one thing they specify in the article, and I definitely want to mention this, is that the books are numbered 1 through 25, but they stress this is no indication, number on the list is no indication of where they, you know, oh, the best versus, you know, the 25th. It's just the order that they put it together. And they said they're all number ones. So definitely check it out. You can go to an article on their website, and you can, you can go to a link on their website, find the article, and you can see all the different books that they say were the best that came out in 2022. Definitely congratulations, Kathy, to you.
And I definitely need to hire you as my publicist.
Linda, do you have another question? Oh, you're muted.
Well, the New York Times, if you look at the New York Times bestsellers, look at the percentage of mystery or thrillers on that list. That's top 10 or 15, depending on which list you look at. But that gives you an indication of what's out there in terms of percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Also, romance rates extremely high in a percentage of published books, but they never hit the bestseller list as often as the mystery thrillers. I don't know why that is, but they sell a hell of a lot of books.
I kind of think there might be a little bit of snobbery at work, and I don't really quite know, but I think because some of the romance novels are beautifully written, and you know, a lot of them are the torn bodice stuff, which is fun on vacation, but you know, it's like I don't quite understand that list, so I don't.
Yeah. What is it based on? I think it's based on sales, isn't it?
I thought it was, but you know, it just seems a little weird. I need to investigate that more, because there can be some publishing houses that have a little bit more influence than others. So
I was thinking that too, and they might just be looking at the top, you know, the big three, the big five, whatever. Okay, so the whole point, guys, is that we want Kathy to for you guys to be curious enough about her and to be interested enough to go buy her books and get them off the shelf, and for you to read them. And so we must spend some time chatting about your most recent publication, which is Trust Issues, and that just came out in December. So we're just a little over, you know, a month in. How's it going, Kathy? And tell us about the book.
Well, first of all, before I forget, if you live in Lance said I live in Marietta. I used to live in Marietta, but when I became a grandmother for the 5th time, my youngest daughter is in Tucker. So we moved to Lilburn, and someone said, I'm not really familiar with Lilburn. And I said, no one's familiar with Lilburn, but I love it here. I love the move, and I'm very glad that I did it. But I'm having a book launch party, more of a book signing in Marietta. It's at the Book Exchange. It's on Canton Road. Now, that's not Canton Street in Roswell. This is a Marietta address, the Book Exchange. It's a really interesting little bookstore, and the people are lovely to work with. They don't have walk by traffic, because it's in one of those shopping centers. It's been in business forever. And they are really friendly to local authors. If you're in the area or have some free time tomorrow from 2 to 4, I'll be there. The Book Exchange in Marietta. But if you have books, your own book coming out, you need to talk to the owner, Jennifer Gillum. And I asked her if I could, tell people about her, and she's very open. They're going to let me have wine, so there'll be wine and snacks. And I decided only white wine because I could just see people spilling red wine on the rug, and that'd be great for their mystery club, but not so good for me. I'd have to probably give them a new rug.
So the wine will not be just for you.
No, well, it's for me. Well, it may be. I don't know if anybody will show up. You never know. I have lots of responses, but I understand about
Well,
life.
that bookstore is just up the road from us, about 10 minutes, so I'll probably be there.
You got to drop by at least and have a glass of wine, and I'm going to have these little cream puff things too. I wanted to have thematic food for trust issues, and there's a grandmother in it, Jams, and I'll tell you about that. But Jams makes really good ham biscuits, but since I'm coming all the way from Lilburn, I couldn't figure out a way to have warm biscuits. And I make terrible biscuits, so probably it's just as well. But trust issues had a rocky start for me because I had this really fun party scheduled for December 13th, I think it was, or 15th. And that was when the book came out. And I got COVID like 3 days before. So I had to cancel it. So I've been kind of quarantining myself this week to make sure I stay well. And I was going to have, the original one was going to be at a clubhouse, which would have been evening and a little bit livelier. But I think this was going to be pretty lively too. And I'm hoping to have, when my sequel to The Sometime Sister comes out in June, I'm hoping to have a clubhouse party and everyone's invited to that too. But trust issues is kind of a, I don't look to use fancy words for this, but kind of an homage to my grandmother. She was one of the people in my life who, a lot of people in my life tell me you can do whatever you wanted to. But when she said it, I believed it. And we had a very close relationship. She was hilarious. So the grandmother in my book is not my grandmother, because the opening paragraph in my book explains that the character Jams was, her daughter was conceived at Woodstock right after Janis Joplin sang A Piece of My Heart. And the daughter is as conservative as she could possibly be, but the grandmother loves to tell the story of the inception of her child, but won't tell her who the father is. And the narrator is Claire. She's the granddaughter and the daughter. And so there's this generational thing going on between them. Claire's mother wants to know who her father is. The grandmother is adamant not to tell her. She had a wonderful stepfather. And Claire's kind of caught in the middle between these two women she really, really loves. In the meantime, dead bodies show up, because that's what always happens. And Claire works for a PR firm. She's got a terrible client. He's a crooked judge, a racist judge. He's horrible. She's thinking, I got to get out of this business. And that's when she becomes embroiled in a murder. And the mystery goes from there.
Well, it sounds fascinating. And I think we are curious about tomorrow's event. It's at the Book Exchange in Marietta, but what are the hours? 2 to 4.
But it's a bookstore. You can come as early and leave as late.
I can't travel in bookstore.
But I build it from 2 to 4 just so people would have a idea of would know when I was going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, they're really nice there.
All right. So that book sounds very, very interesting, and I'm really curious to get my copy. And I know we agreed we could go a little over past 11 p.m. I mean 11 a.m. We're here all day if we were going to 11 p.m. I want to talk about your podcast. That's something we haven't touched on yet. So tell us about Wild Women Who Take Flight and how you got involved, and about the other people that are on that your co-hosts. Tell us about your co-hosts.
I think it's very, when I talk about podcasts, of course, I knew what a podcast was, but I don't really listen to a lot of podcasts. But this woman, here's what's so interesting. Things just come out of nowhere sometimes. There was a woman in New York. She has a podcast and she was looking for guests. So I thought, sure, I'd love to be on a podcast. And I thought, not quite sure how involved it is. Well, she did ours over the phone. It was so easy. And I was part of a critique group with a heterosexual critique group. That's not right. Everybody, it was mixed. And so there were women in the group who felt like we loved the male perspective, but our audience was primarily women. And sometimes the men we didn't care about the technical stuff. Like I would something happen and they'd go, well, I'm not sure if you need a AA battery for that, or if you've got right on the tree. And I'm like, I don't care. No one cares. Let's move on. And I would just take the battery out. But we did feel that we could move deeper in our work with just having this offshoot of women. So I still went to the other critique group, love them. But we had this, and we called ourselves Wild Women Who Write, just because that was fun. And after I did that podcast, I said, you know what? We could do a podcast. And they were kind of like, really? I said, sure, we can do a podcast. All we have to do is get some guests. So we called it Wild Women Who Write Take Flight. And we started, it'll be 2 years in July. And we have I think we have about 40 episodes. Some of them are mini episodes that we started doing with writing tips. I did one that I really like. It's kind of bragging, but I do like it. It's about your first paragraph, your first sentence, and how we put so much pressure on ourselves for that. And that one has been, I think, helpful for people. Those are little mini ones that we just pop on. They're from 15 to 5 minutes short. But we've had some wonderful guests. And my co-hosts are Kim Conry. She has this fantastic book out called Stealing Aries. It's a sci-fi romance. I'm not a big reader of either one, and I love it. It's set, I'm not even going to tell you all it's about, but you'll look at the cover and you're going to go, oh, I don't know, because there's her audience likes a lot of bust and weapons, but I love the book. Gabby Anderson has a book called South of Happily. She is herself the child of Hungarian immigrants, and her story is kind of her story, but her character Katie is a hoot. It's a coming of age of an older person coming of age, a young woman in her 20s, close to 30, but it's beautifully written. It's hilarious. Kat Filer, excuse me, let me get a little Coke. Kat Filer is remote. She has traveled all over the country in a little silver Airstream. It's one of the nice ones,
Yeah.
but it's small. And she has written a Victorian, what did we call it? It's a Victorian dark fantasy, I would say. She was looking at steampunk, but it's really not steampunk. And so it's fantastic. It's coming out in June as well. So she may come, and we're going to have a double launch. So everybody's going to be invited. I'll keep you posted. And then we have Lisbeth Jones. Lisbeth is writing what is really literary fiction. We really have to stay on her to finish it because she's a perfectionist. She's also a brilliant editor. So if anyone's interested in having an editor who loves to walk the walk with you, she will do copy editing, but she really likes to help you develop. So if you're looking for someone like that, please get in touch and I'll hook you up with Elizabeth because she's great. So we have writers in our group, we have editors, we have people who are so much better at social media than I am. So it really helps to have a group. And we have this group. So people know that.
So multi-genre writers, and you get together and you talk to other, I mean, are all 5 of you typically on the program? And how often do you broadcast?
we usually have 2 interview broadcasts coming out a month. Where unfortunately or fortunately, we don't do it live. So you just go to Wild Women Who Write, Take Flight. If you just type in Wild Women Who Write, you'll find it. We aren't on Apple, but we're on almost every other podcast. Spotify, I think a lot of people get it on Spotify. And we've had Emily Carpenter. We have had Tara Allred. We had Kimberly Brock. She's got this new book out, The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare, which is getting a lot of attention. We've had Kimberly Bell, who's an international, and that was back before COVID. And these people came to my house. They lived in the area. Kimberly Bell lives half the time in Midtown and the other half in Amsterdam. And she was just delightful. It's like people were just so supportive. Now we do mostly Zoom. We are going to interview McKinley Ashton, who is really Patty Force. She has a pen name. She wants to do an in-person one, which is so much more fun. Beverly Armento wrote Seeing Eye Girl, brilliant memoir. And she was, we've just had some lovely people. We had one licensed counselor, an LPC, and he came on to talk about pitfalls if you're putting a psychiatrist or a counselor in your book, because in the Unreliables, I have a shady psychiatrist, and it's kind of redeemed at the end. He isn't, but I'm not knocking the psychiatrist in it. But he talked about it. His episode is really, really good. So I think it's called Tell Me How You Feel. But you can find our website descriptions of the podcast.
Good to know. And I think it's very interesting, and it's a different way to answer, Linda's question earlier, like about, promoting. And it is a way for you to get your voice out there, as well as your co-hosts out there, and have you on people's minds. And it also doesn't restrict you to region. Anybody can get on the internet and seek you out and listen to the show. So I think that's wonderful, very creative and different. We're probably ready to wrap up, but before we go, does anybody in the audience want to chime in and ask any questions?
I've got one more question.
Please, Linda, you're great. Can you come every month?
I got my phone here, and I was looking up information on the new book that you're doing, and I noticed that she goes to a couples workshop by herself.
Yeah, single.
What's with that?
This one is probably funnier than most of mine, because she's she's torn between her wild ass grandmother and her mother, who is totally buttoned up. And Claire is kind of torn. She doesn't really know herself. And she has a fiance, but when she's filling out, he's gone a lot. And when she's filling out the form, it just never occurred to her. She didn't pay attention, and she didn't notice that, she's supposed to sign up with some. So when she gets there, she's like, oh no. And she embarrasses easily. And that scene to me is hilarious, because the leader of the workshop, all of us have been in workshops with a leader like this. And we've thought, why, Lord, did I sign up for this? and that I love that scene. It's early in the book. And then something happens at the workshop that sets the tone for the rest of the book too. So it's fun. And dead bodies.
Dead bodies. We got to have those dead bodies. So just 2 more things. The first one I'm going to ask you is, you're about to publish book number 4. So we're going to just go ahead and say you've got 4 books out. What have you learned through the course of writing those 4 books? Like what has changed for you as a writer? What have you learned? How has your stories developed or changed through the process?
That's a good question. And I think that I've gotten more confident in developing voice, because in this sequel that's coming out in June, I have, I picked back up with Grace, but I have a brand new character, and very difficult for me. I go back and forth, but only between two. I read The Paris Apartment, and there's like 10 points of view. And I thought, I read it because of that. And I don't recommend it because my head was spinning. But I wanted to have two really strong voices. And I don't think I would have been confident enough to try it. I tried it with my young adult, and I did pretty well with it, I think, but it still has to have a lot more work. So developing voice, I think I've become more confident in. I will tell you that Black Rose does not edit. You either pay for your own editor or you do it yourself. There are some great programs out there that I can send to Dawn if she wants to get out to the group if you are editing yourself. So I have learned how difficult editing is, and I tried really hard to get it right the first time, like spend time on looking at the work, but not totally editing as I go, because that'll kill you.
Mhm.
So
Well, I was going to say, I know that, and you had already said we don't necessarily need to listen to the advice, but one of advice that I've heard often is don't edit as you go, because you'll bog yourself down. So I think that's probably
when
path.
that kind of editing, I'm not really talking about catching mistakes so much as a lot of people, you'll sit down, you'll write 500, 1,000 words. And then when you come back to it, you need to reread that with an editor's eye to content. And that is good because that keeps the flow going. But if you get bogged down on, do I need two commas or whatever, you'll drive yourself crazy. So yes.
Okay, and so then the last question I have for you is really it's more on the personal side. I'm curious, like, what is a book that you've recently purchased and why did you purchase it?
Oh, that's really a good question. I'm in 2 book clubs. I'm having to back away from one of them. We read Blood Sugar in one of the book clubs, and I would love for people to read that because it's a quick read. It's an easy read, but it's her first novel. And I get kind of angry because I think we've all done something better. And this one is I've learned that a lot of books get a lot of hype because the author knew someone or wrote other stuff. And so for that book, I purchased it because it was part of the book club. I was glad that I purchased it and glad that I read it because I thought, okay, I felt like I was being kind of pretentious, but I also thought, well, it's a good first attempt. And I was like, it made me feel more confident that, yeah, there are writers out there who get breaks before they're ready for them, I think. And so I wouldn't buy anything else by this author, I don't think. And that's kind of sad. So I got way off on a tangent with that. We're also reading White Feminism in my other book club. And wow, I'm learning so much. That book club is more of, it's multiracial, and I'm trying to learn different points of view. It was based on the premise that when white women get fired up about injustice, you know what we do? We start a book club. Like, we want to go a step further. So we're learning stuff. So White Feminism, it's a studyable one.
That's interesting. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask the question is because people don't just read the genre that they write or, that they're interested in. And so it's always good to know what else is out there. Well, I have definitely enjoyed this, Kathy. You are very interesting, and I'm excited. I'm crossing my fingers I'll get to see you tomorrow, because I would like to go to your book launch and support you for sure. Plus, I want to get a copy of the book. So hopefully I will be able to work that in my schedule. And before we go, we'll let Lance take the floor.
Thank you, Dawn, and thanks, Kathy. It was a really great interview. I just want to mention Reader Rendezvous. And as I understand it, you're going to be out of town next weekend, right?
Yes, I am.
So that,
Charlie and I both, so I can't even kick it to Charlie to take over for me.
and then on February 11th is our regular chapter meeting, which will be hybrid. For those that want to show up, we'll be at the Smyrna Library, our traditional location, but also on Zoom. The guest is Evie Knight. She is a horror writer and a Bram Stoker debut novel winner. And she's going to talk about how to write the perfect villain in 8 easy steps. And so that's hybrid meeting in person and on Zoom. And then in March coming up, we were talking about editing. We have Grace Winter, who is an editor, and she's going to talk about some of the pitfalls of self-editing and editing software, as well as the benefits of getting someone like her to do your editing.
I bet.
She was on our podcast. She's great.
I have one more comment just about when you go back to read through your draft, your first draft. I discovered on Word that they will read it to me, and it used to be, just very flat and robotic, but they have this great reader voice now, and she reads with expression, and it's like, wow. So if you write on Word, check out the read aloud part.
Thank you, Linda. That's great. That's
Well,
great
it's
advice.
it's life-changing, and you do notice little things like, if you leave out a period, maybe you've done something and it's just, and you catch context and just all kinds of things. So it's fun, and again, she's a very good reader, whoever she is.
Well, thank you, everybody. I have enjoyed this. We will be back next month with another off the shelf, and that information is available on our website. I want to encourage everybody, if you have not checked out the Sisters in Crime Atlanta website, we do have a new website, and that's where you'll find all the information, as well as our Facebook page. I always post it on the Sisters in Crime Atlanta Facebook page, and also on the Off the Shelf page. So, and looking forward to seeing you. And by the way, these are always, or have been, Zoom virtual. So that if that's helpful to those of you that don't live in the area, and you can still attend. So, Charlie.
Dawn, will you hang for a minute?
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye,
Thank you,
everybody. Enjoy the
everybody.
rest of your Saturday.
Thank you.